From nurse to inconvenience, from mother to problem to manage. Hear how I turned the tables. They thought I'd fade into the background. Instead, I put on my pink linen dress and stood taller than ever. Join me to the end. Hi, friends. My name is Loretta, and I'm 77 years old. Before I begin my story, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, what city are you listening from? It warms my heart to know where my story is reaching. I never imagined my life would end up in a so-called guest room. For most of my years, I was a nurse at Memorial Hospital in Memphis. I worked nights, catching babies as they entered this world, holding trembling hands when it was someone's time to leave. I buried my husband James far too soon, raised my daughter Paige by myself, and thought I had done my job well enough that I would grow old with dignity. But then came the stroke. Not a dramatic one, just enough to make my morning shaky, my balance uncertain. That was when Paige called me with her polished, determined voice. "Mom, you can't live alone anymore. You'll come stay with us, at least until things settle." It sounded like love. Maybe it even was. I sold my little condo on the quiet street I adored, south-facing windows, geraniums on the sill, and I put almost everything I had into Paige's house. My savings, my retirement cushion, my sense of safety. The down payment was largely mine, though the mortgage was in her name. I told myself it didn't matter. Family mattered. At first I convinced myself it would work. I baked blueberry muffins that made the whole kitchen smell like Saturday mornings. I folded the children's laundry, left neat stacks on their beds. I covered the water bill without a word. I thought that would make me part of the fabric of this household, woven in with Tyler, 15 and lanky as a newborn colt, and Zoe, 12, delicate as a reed in the wind. For a short while, it almost felt like a shared home. Tyler would flop down next to me on the couch with a shy smile. Zoe still let me braid her hair in the mornings. Paige would squeeze my shoulder quickly before rushing out to her meetings. I thought, yes, I am useful. I am wanted. I belong. But usefulness has a way of turning into something else. It started small. One afternoon, I walked into the living room and my chair, the one I'd brought from my condo, the soft blue one where I read every night, was gone. I asked Paige about it. "Oh, Mom," she said lightly, already halfway down the hall. "We moved it to the garage. It just didn't fit the aesthetic." The aesthetic. That word stung in a way I can't quite explain. Then my name disappeared from the little sticky note on the fridge with the Wi-Fi password. It used to say Paige and Mom Wi-Fi. Now it just said the Millers. I asked Tyler for the new password once, and he looked startled, as if it had never crossed his mind that I would need it. One by one, my things vanished from sight. My baking pans tucked away in high cupboards I couldn't reach. The framed photograph of Paige when she was 7, gap-toothed and beaming, moved off the mantel into a box. Even the roses I had planted along the fence wilted because no one remembered to water them when my legs were too unsteady. I became background. Not a person, not really. More like an extra pair of hands, quiet, efficient, invisible. I was the folded towels, the clean dishes, the warm tea waiting at the end of the day. And in return, I received polite nods, distracted thank yous, hurried footsteps past my door. "Hi, Grandma," Tyler would mumble, his eyes glued to the glowing screen in his hand. "Hey," Zoe would call casually, the door to her room clicking shut before I could ask about her day. And Paige, my own daughter. She treated me like a courteous neighbor who had overstayed her welcome. She would smile tightly if I set muffins on the counter, but rarely touched them. She spoke to me with the careful patience people use with strangers on a bus. I told myself it was just a season. They were busy. Modern life was harder than it looked. I had been there once, with James before the cancer took him. Maybe they simply had no space for me in the daylight hours. But at night, when the house was still, I sat in the guest room, my room, as they called it, and felt the weight of invisibility pressing down on me. I would touch the pink linen dress hanging in the back of my closet, the one I'd bought to celebrate my retirement but never wore, and I would think, when did I become so small? Still, I kept silent. I kept nodding. I thought that was what good mothers did, smiled, adjusted, endured, until the day I overheard something that pierced deeper than silence ever could. If you only knew the words I heard that afternoon, the words that still echo in my bones, you would understand why everything changed. If only you knew what I overheard later, words that broke something inside me forever. The day it happened, I wasn't eavesdropping. I was doing what I always did, making myself small enough to pass between the edges of everyone else's lives without touching anything. I was carrying my chipped mug back to the kitchen to refill my tea. Paige paced barefoot across the tile, phone at her ear, one hand slicing the air. Her meeting hand, the one that turns every sentence into a bullet point. The house was bright and cool, lemon cleaner still clinging to the countertops. I stood in the doorway, not hidden, not sneaking, just there, waiting for a pause so I could slip to the kettle and become invisible again. "She doesn't even notice it," Paige said, voice low but flat with certainty. "It's her room. It smells like old people, like a nursing home. It seeps into the hallway." She laughed, a clipped little sound I didn't recognize. "I've sprayed the whole bottom floor. It clings to everything." The word clings found the softest part of me. It hung there, like sticky summer air in Memphis when the river won't move. My grip loosened, the mug wobbled. I steadied it with both hands and backed away, the soles of my slippers silent on the hardwood. In my guest room, I shut the door softly, the way you close a wound to keep the air from stinging it. The tea had cooled. I set it beside the framed photo of 7-year-old Paige, grinning, no front teeth, chin tilted like a question mark. For a moment I saw her tiny hand patting my cheek, whispering, "One more lullaby," the way she used to before my night shift at Memorial. Now my daughter was a woman whose home smelled like lemon cleaner and efficiency, and I was a problem that clung. Shame is a quiet thing when you're 77. It doesn't burn, it settles. It sits heavy in the chest and makes you rearrange yourself around it. I took a shower, then another. I scrubbed with lavender soap she'd given me last Christmas, still sealed in its pretty box until that moment. I washed my nightgowns, then washed them again. I lined them neatly on hangers to dry because I was afraid the family's clothes would carry my scent if I used the dryer. That evening, Paige lit a candle on the little table outside my door. The label said, "Clean Linen," a minimalist white sticker on thick glass. "Don't take it personally," she said when I opened the door. "Sometimes the hallway feels stuffy. Don't take it personally," as if there were a way not to. So I began to live like a careful guest in a model home. I learned how long I could run the shower before the pipes sighed. I kept my toothbrush tucked in a plastic case beneath the sink. I folded towels so crisp you could hear the edges when you stacked them. I started keeping tomatoes behind the shed, just a few plants I'd nursed from the seeds at my old condo. They never sweetened properly back there. The soil was wrong, the sun reluctant. I tended them anyway because tending is what I know how to do. Some nights I'd creep to the kitchen for tea and find Tyler there, lit by the refrigerator like a boy caught in moonlight. "Hey, Grandma," he'd say, startled but kind. "You want a sandwich?" "No, sweetheart, just tea." He'd spread peanut butter in careful, even strokes. My daughter's son, methodical to the bone, and then blurt something honest and too big for his age. "Mom's been weird about the house," he said once, eyes on the bread. Something about needing to present well for Dad's promotion. He rolled his eyes, and I saw Paige at 15, all elbows and indignation. "I think your mom just wants things to be nice," I said, and the words sounded like a pamphlet even to me. In the mornings, I baked blueberry scones, sugar cookies with lemon zest, the flavors of our old Saturdays when Paige was little and the world was made of dawn light and paper napkins. I laid the warm plate on the counter just as the kids came down. "We're cutting carbs," Paige said, without looking up from her phone. I wrapped the scones in foil and slid them into the freezer next to last week's banana bread and the month's worth of casseroles I'd made for their trip to Chicago, news I'd received the night before they left. When something needed doing, I did it. When my name wasn't needed, it wasn't used. It's a strange thing to become a hum in your own life. You exist, you vibrate, but no one turns to find the source of the sound. Then came dinner, salmon, salad, dressed the way Paige likes, precise, measured, controlled. She lifted her fork and said, "The neurologist thinks Mom's recovery has plateaued. We should look into more regular care." "I'm sitting right here," I said. The voice that came out of me was thin, a ribbon instead of a rope. "Of course, Mom," Paige answered, blinking as if she'd forgotten the direction of her words. "We're just concerned. Concern is a cousin to containment." I could feel the walls being measured, how much space I would be allowed, how much light. Later, I searched for the reading glasses I wear on a chain. I found them in the refrigerator, sitting primly next to the strawberries in their plastic coffin. I laughed a little at myself, then stopped, because I could already hear the verdict. It's getting worse. She lost her glasses 3 times this week. She needs structure. The candle outside my door burned down by inches. I left it unlit and tried to believe it was about the hallway. One afternoon, Zoe passed by while I watered the tomatoes in their exiled row behind the shed. "Mom says the plants don't go with the aesthetic," she said, mimicking Paige's clipped tone without malice. "Children repeat what keeps the peace." "I'll find them a better spot," I told her, "somewhere they can breathe." "Like you?" she said, and then flushed. "Sorry, Grandma. I didn't mean—" "It's all right," I said, surprised by how the truth sounded coming from a 12-year-old. "I'm working on it." That night, sleep kept its distance. I went for tea and found Tyler again, the refrigerator halo backlighting his long limbs. "Mom and Dad were talking," he said, without preamble, lowering his voice as if the cabinets had ears. "About a place. For you. Like, with nurses and stuff. They said it would be better for everyone." The kettle's whistle rose like a thin scream. I turned off the burner with a steady hand that didn't feel like my own. "I see," I said, "because there are only so many words a grandmother should force a grandson to hear." "I told Mom it was messed up," he muttered, cheeks coloring. "Your family." He hugged me then, awkward and earnest, and the child I used to rock flickered across his face. When he padded upstairs with his sandwich, I sat in the dark and felt something inside me lean away from the house, the way a plant turns from a window when the light has changed. On my 77th birthday, they remembered at dessert, store-bought cheesecake, efficient and forgettable. "Oh my gosh, Mom, it's your birthday," Paige gasped, as if the date were a coat she'd misplaced. "It's just a day," I said, and pretended it didn't land where it always lands, in the place that keeps score no matter how old you are. The next morning, Paige stood in the doorway of my room with a damp towel around her hair. Mascara wand paused midair. "Can you pick up the dry cleaning and take Zoe to the dentist at 4? "No," I said. The word felt new in my mouth, small and solid like a seed. She blinked. What? I have plans. What plans? Just plans. She stared long enough to make it a challenge, then retreated to the safe urgency of her phone. I put on the pink linen dress that had waited too long in the dark. It was cool against my skin, then warm, and in the mirror I saw a woman with lines and history and a spine. I took myself to lunch, alone, with a glass of white wine and a croque monsieur. I ate slowly because I could. The waiter called me ma'am in a way that felt like ma'am had muscle again. For 2 hours I was not a problem to manage. I was a person. Courage, I wrote at the top of a small list in my bedside notebook that night. Then I added name, memory, choice. Things that were still mine. But courage needs a direction. It found one the day I went looking for a book of stamps in Paige's office. She kept them in the middle drawer under the printer paper. I knew because I'd mailed the children's thank you notes from there. When I opened the drawer, my fingers brushed a burgundy folder heavy enough to make the wood sigh. It was labeled in Paige's precise handwriting, estate planning. I knew, before I even pulled it out, that the worst hurt was waiting inside, not in anyone's voice, but in ink. And I promise you this, the words I read in those papers changed everything more than the candle, more than the laughter, more than the cheesecake. You think words can cling? Try signatures. What I found in Paige's burgundy folder, glossy brochures, bank statements, and a half-filled legal form, told me exactly where I stood. Next, I went to the only person who had never forgotten I was somebody. The burgundy folder never left my mind. For days I could see the careful handwriting, the highlighted numbers, the brochures of pastel-colored care facilities with smiling actors pretending to be happy old people. I didn't confront Paige. What would be the point? If she believed planning where to warehouse me was reasonable, she wouldn't suddenly start asking where I wanted to live. Still, the weight of it sat on my chest. It pressed when I stirred sugar into my tea, when I watered the exiled tomatoes, when I listened to the muffled arguments Paige and Mason had about budgets and timelines late at night. One morning, I stood by the window in my pink linen dress, the one I'd started wearing like armor, and thought, I need someone who sees me as more than a problem to solve. That's when I remembered Raymond Teague. Raymond had been our family lawyer for decades. He handled James's estate when cancer took him. He drafted my will, helped me navigate pension papers, even sat with me when grief blurred every line on the page. He had the kind of presence that slowed you down, an oak tree of a man, steady and grounded. So I called his office. The secretary's voice was familiar, warm. Of course, Mrs. Dean, Mr. Teague can see you tomorrow morning. The next day I dressed carefully. Slacks, a soft cardigan, a touch of lipstick I hadn't worn in months. Not for vanity, for dignity. I called a taxi and told Paige I had physical therapy. She didn't question it. In fact, she seemed relieved I'd be out of the house. Raymond's office hadn't changed in 30 years. Same leather chairs, same oak desk, same diplomas with dust in the corners of the frames. The man himself had aged, of course, his hair silver now, his hands lined, but his eyes were sharp as ever. Loretta Dean, he said, standing to greet me. It's been too long. I felt my throat tighten at the sound of my own name spoken with recognition. Not Mom, not Grandma, just Loretta. I shook his hand. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. For you, always, he said. You were with my Martha in her final days. I don't forget things like that. We sat. I folded my hands in my lap. Raymond, I need to know exactly where I stand, legally, with the house. He didn't look surprised. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out a thick file, sliding it across the desk like he'd been waiting. "Your daughter never filed the deed transfer we discussed years ago," he said. "Loretta, the house is still entirely yours. Your name is on every page." I stared at him. My pulse beat in my ears. "Mine?" "Yours," he said gently, "which means you have full authority. You can sell it, transfer it, place it in trust, whatever you wish." Relief came first, rushing like air into collapsed lungs. But guilt followed close behind. Paige believed the house was hers. I had let her believe it, maybe even encouraged it, because I thought it would make her feel secure. Raymond leaned forward. "May I ask what brought you here now?" I hesitated. Then the words tumbled out. The candle, the whispers, the folder in her office, the plans being made without me. His expression darkened. "And your health? How are you managing after the stroke?" "My doctor says I've recovered remarkably well," I answered firmly. "I take my medication. I exercise. I am perfectly capable of living independently." He nodded, satisfied. I never doubted that. For the next hour, he laid out my options. I could sell the house outright. I could create a trust, protecting it from anyone else's interference. I could stipulate exactly who inherits and under what conditions. "Loretta," he said at last, removing his glasses to polish them with a handkerchief. "You have more power here than you realize. But the question is, what do you want?" What do I want? It had been so long since anyone asked me that. I nearly laughed. But instead I whispered, "I want to live like a person again. Not a burden, not a background noise. A person." Raymond's eyes softened. "Then we'll make sure of it." I walked out of that office with a folder of my own this time. Papers, notes, possibilities. I held it against my chest like a shield. The taxi driver asked, "Where to, ma'am?" "Home," I said automatically. But the word tasted strange, because the truth was Paige's house hadn't felt like home in a long time. As we pulled into the driveway, I saw the roses I had planted, their edges browned, petals crisping under the Tennessee sun. Still there, still trying, just like me. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. I felt dangerous. Not in the way of harm, but in the way of a woman who has remembered her own name. And I knew one thing with certainty. I wasn't done yet. That same week, an old friend walked back into my life. The kind of friend who doesn't just visit, but changes the path you thought was already set in stone. 2 days after I left Raymond's office with my chin a little higher and my name beating steady in my chest, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Paige was at work, the kids were at school. Mason had flown to Charlotte for meetings and a round of golf, disguised as networking. I opened the door and there she was, Dr. Elaine Foster, my friend from Memorial Hospital. My co-conspirator from decades of night shifts, the woman who could read a room, a chart, or a soul without breaking a sweat. Her hair was silver now, cut in a stylish bob, her posture as straight as the IV poles we used to push down fluorescent halls. She held a brown paper bag like an offering. "Loretta Dean," she said, gathering me into a hug that smelled faintly of hand cream and jasmine. "You are a hard woman to find these days." I laughed in that startled way you laugh when the past knocks, and your heart opens before your mouth does. "Elaine," I breathed, and for a second I was 30 again, tying a mask behind my head while we counted heartbeats together. She set the bag on the kitchen counter and pulled out 3 tomatoes, real ones, heavy and sun-warm, and a small pot of basil with leaves glossy as new pennies. "From my garden," she said. "Figured you'd know what to do with them." I looked at the tomatoes and felt my throat thicken. "I tried growing some out back," I said, "behind the shed." The wrong son? She asked gently. The wrong everything, I admitted. We made tea because that's what women like us do when the air around a story is delicate. We talked about safe things first. Who retired, who moved to Florida, who still sends Christmas cards in July. Then Elaine set her mug down and aimed those clinician eyes at me. How are you, really? The truth unclenched itself, not in a messy flood. Elaine never required drama to take you seriously, but in simple, complete sentences. I told her about the candle labeled clean linen, the chair sent to the garage for the aesthetic, the Wi-Fi password that forgot my name. I told her about the burgundy folder and the brochures with pastel smiles, the power of attorney form half filled in Paige's tidy hand. Elaine listened without flinching. When I finished, she reached across the counter and took my hand. You are not a problem to manage, she said. You're Loretta, and you still get a say. I went to Raymond, I said. The house is still mine. She nodded once, as if confirming a diagnosis she'd already suspected. Good, because I want to show you something, and I want you to see it with your own eyes, not through anyone else's plan. That Friday, she pulled up in a sensible sedan that had the faint smell of dog hair and peppermint. We drove past the big houses with magazine lawns, past the strip mall where Paige buys candles that smell like apologies, past the park where the crepe myrtles were throwing a private pink parade for anyone who cared to look. We turned into a lane I'd never noticed and stopped before a low, cheerful cluster of cottages tucked behind a pale yellow fence. A hand-painted wooden sign read, Horizon Gardens Cooperative. No gates, no guardhouse, no pretense. Just a place. Inside the gate, the air changed. It wasn't magic, just evidence of care. Raised beds spill over with herbs and marigolds. A small fountain burbled like a polite laugh. Benches were set in actual conversation circles instead of museum rows. An old dog slept under a fig tree, oblivious to the world's nonsense. The woman at the desk wore bright blue glasses and no makeup. Her name tag said Margot. You must be Loretta, she said, like I'd kept her waiting for coffee. Elaine told me you were coming. No one hustled me. No one sized me up like a billable hour. Margot handed me a folder and a map and said, Take your time. The common room's on the left. Fresh cookies if Harold hasn't eaten them. We walked through a space that looked like a living room designed by people who actually live. 2 women were playing Scrabble at a table near a window. A man with a newspaper dozed the way happy people do when sunlight pages through them. In one corner, brushes stood upright in jam jars next to a few vases of wilting wildflowers that still refused to quit. Come outside, Elaine said. I want you to see the gardens. Tomatoes, real, fearless tomatoes, climbed twine. Rosemary and mint argued gently in matching terracotta pots. I heard laughter float from a gazebo where a small group was negotiating the rules of canasta, like peace envoys. How does it work? I asked. It's a co-op, Elaine said. Non-profit, self-governed. Everyone owns a share, pays a reasonable monthly fee that covers utilities, landscaping, maintenance. There's a shuttle to the grocery store 3 days a week. The hospital is 10 minutes away. Clinic on site twice weekly. No one's warehoused here. People live here. What about help? I asked, if you need it. We bring in what we need, she said. Neighbors notice if you haven't opened your curtains. People knock, but your front door is your front door. She led me down a brick path to Unit 8, a small cottage at the end of the row with a porch, just big enough for a chair and a side table. The kind of porch where friendships begin over iced tea and a breeze. She opened the door and stepped aside. The place was bright without being shiny. South-facing windows, a compact kitchen with a breakfast ledge that begged for a blue bowl of lemons. a bedroom with a window for morning light, and a corner that said, "Put your reading chair here, Loretta." In the bathroom, grab bars were installed like good manners, present, helpful, not announcing themselves. I stood still and let the room talk to me. "It feels like somewhere I could breathe," I said. Elaine passed me a single sheet with numbers. They made sense. Not charity, not a trap, just math that respected a life built over 77 years. We stepped onto the tiny patio. Beyond the rail, a shared garden stretched like a friendly handshake. Basil and lavender perfumed the air the way real things do, imperfect, changing, alive. "What do you think?" Elaine asked. I said slowly. "I've been shrinking to fit inside someone else's idea of me, and here, I don't feel smaller." We found Harold by the fountain, a retired contractor with forearms like cedar and a voice so gentle it softened the gravel in his throat. He offered me a cookie from a paper napkin and a shy grin. "Bingo on Wednesdays," he said. "Not mandatory, but we laugh." Margot reappeared as if answering a question I hadn't yet spoken. She held a slim folder. "One unit open this week," she said. "If you're serious, I can hold it for 24 hours. I looked at Elaine. She didn't nod. She didn't push. She just held my gaze the way a nurse holds a line steady while you decide to breathe. "Yes," I said, before fear could dress itself as practicality. "Hold it." We drove home with the windows cracked, the late afternoon air flipping the edges of the application in my lap. My hands shook, first from adrenaline, then from relief. When Elaine pulled into my driveway, I didn't invite her in. This wasn't the kind of moment I wanted framed by lemon cleaner and polite shadows. "Raymond will need to set up a trust," I said, more to myself than to her. "And I should revoke any old powers of attorney, just to be safe." "I'll be your witness," Elaine said, "if you want me." "I do," I answered, and felt the old steadiness return, the one I used to feel rounding a corner with her at 3 a.m., two women moving like a single thought. That night, I opened my bedside notebook and wrote a new list. Trust, application, boxes, start small, tomatoes, pots, note, clear and kind. Then I added a word I had not written since James died, home, and beside it, in smaller letters, mine. In the morning, Paige asked if I could pick up the dry cleaning and wait for the cable guy. "I can't," I said, the seed of no now rooted and leafing. "I have appointments." "With who?" "With people who see me," I said. I kept my voice even, gracious. "I'll be back for dinner." I wasn't. I sat instead on Elaine's porch and ate tomato slices with salt and pepper and a drizzle of oil, the way we used to eat on the hospital's odd Sunday potlucks, when families brought real food and the night smelled like the possibility of rest. By the time the porch light hummed on, I knew I wasn't going to ask permission to live my life. I was simply going to live it. And when I left, I wasn't going to slam a door. I was going to leave it gently closed behind me, with a note on the kitchen counter that said exactly what needed saying and nothing more. Because some words don't need to be loud to last. They just need to be true. The next thing I did wasn't brave or cruel. It was necessary. I packed, I planted, and I wrote a note that would change the temperature of that house forever. I don't remember the exact day I decided to leave. Decisions like that don't happen with a trumpet blast or a lightning bolt. They arrive like slow dawn. At first, just a hint of gray, then a blush of light, until suddenly you realize the world is bright enough to see by. After my visit to Horizon Gardens, I started making small moves. Not bold, not reckless, just small. I pulled 3 cardboard boxes from the garage one afternoon when no one was home. Mason had a business trip. Paige had a meeting. The kids were at practice. The garage smelled of paint cans and dust. My life's relics stacked carelessly in the corners. I slid the boxes under my bed like contraband. The first one I labeled kitchen, keep. Inside went my blue ceramic bowl, the one I'd carried from my condo, the one Paige had banished to the garage because it didn't match the aesthetic. I placed it carefully inside with some tea towels that still smelled faintly of cedar from my old chest. The second box, donate. Sweaters I no longer wore, novels I'd read 3 times, kitchen gadgets that belonged more to habit than to me. The third, not for them. This was my quiet rebellion. In it I tucked the pink linen dress, still pressed from its first wear. James's pocket watch, stopped at 3:17 decades ago, but still cool and heavy in my palm. A shoebox of letters, birthday cards, notes from patients' families, drawings from Paige when she was a little girl who thought I hung the moon. Every time I slid a new item inside, it was as though I was reminding myself, I exist beyond their convenience. I became a woman of lists. At night, when the house was silent except for the hum of the dishwasher and the distant laugh track from Paige's Netflix shows, I'd open my notebook and write, call Raymond, finalize trust papers, cancel old bank draft Paige set up, collect medical records from Dr. Harmon, pack tea set from James's mother, tomatoes in pots, ready to travel. Each checkmark was a stitch, pulling my dignity back together. I lied to Paige often in those weeks. Doctor's appointments, physical therapy, library hold pickup. In truth, I was meeting with Raymond. The trust was straightforward. My name on every deed, every page. We'll structure it so that while you live, you hold full control, he explained. When you pass, the house goes exactly where you decide. Can Paige contest it? I asked. She can fuss, Raymond said with the calm of a man who'd seen every family fracture there was. But legally, you'll be untouchable. She has no claim unless you give her one. I signed with steady hands. It felt like signing not just papers, but a declaration of independence. Back at the house, Paige's voice filled the kitchen one evening as she spoke to Mason. She didn't lower it. She rarely did. We'll have to start touring facilities. The neurologist said she's plateauing. If she slips again, we'll be in crisis mode. Crisis mode. I nearly laughed into my teacup. A woman who had held the hands of the dying, caught newborns with trembling cries, worked nights for 4 decades. I was their crisis. That night I whispered no to the ceiling as though practicing a new language. No, I can't pick up the dry cleaning. No, I won't be home to make dinner. No, I'm not available. Each no felt strange, but also thrilling, like trying on a coat you realize fits better than you expected. One evening, Paige asked, Mom, can you take Zoe to her dentist appointment at 4 tomorrow? I looked at her, really looked at her. She was beautiful, strong, competent, but she had grown used to me as background noise. I can't, I said evenly. I have plans. She blinked. Plans? Yes. With who? People who see me, I answered, and left the room before she could press further. My courage grew in increments, like those tomatoes fighting mildew behind the shed, fragile, stubborn, alive. Elaine checked in often. How's the packing going? She'd ask. Slow but steady. Slow and steady wins, she said. Remember, we've pushed IV meds into veins at 3 a.m. in the middle of chaos. You can handle a few boxes. I smiled at that. The truth was, I wasn't just packing objects. I was packing pieces of myself, salvaging them from the corners of a house that no longer welcomed me. The day the trust was finalized, Raymond shook my hand and said, You're protected now. Whatever comes, you stand on solid ground. I left his office and sat in the taxi with the papers in my lap, a weight both heavy and liberating. I thought of the note I would leave behind, clear and kind but firm. Not a plea, not an apology, just truth. The tomatoes were ripening in their pots by then, small green fists ready to soften into red. I tended them daily, whispering as though they understood. Soon, soon we'll be somewhere better. I didn't slam doors. I didn't scream. My rebellion was quieter than that. It was in the folding of cardigans into a box labeled, "Not for them." It was in the steady scratch of my pen across legal papers. It was in the whisper of no that grew louder each day. It was in remembering finally that I was Loretta Dean, and I was about to leave a house where I was tolerated, to step into a life where I would be welcomed. But when the weekend came, and the family drove off with sunscreen and luggage, I did the unthinkable. I left a note on the counter and walked away from everything I had built. It was a Friday morning in June when the house finally exhaled without me. Paige had a conference in Asheville. Mason was due at a client meeting in Charlotte, and the kids were already packed for a weekend soccer tournament. I heard the bustle of luggage rolling down the stairs, the chorus of reminders. "Don't forget the sunscreen, Tyler. Zoe, where's your cleats?" And the slam of the front door. Then silence. I stood in the kitchen, the mug of tea warm in my hand, and realized this was the moment I'd been waiting for. I had rehearsed it in my mind for weeks, every step mapped like a nurse planning the next shift, precise, deliberate, efficient. There would be no panic, only steady breath. Within minutes, Elaine pulled into the driveway in her sensible sedan. Behind her came Margot from Horizon Gardens in a borrowed van, and Harold, broad-shouldered and quiet, a cardboard saint, ready to lift what I no longer could. They didn't knock. They knew this wasn't the time for ceremony. We moved like a team who'd done this before, each of us slipping into unspoken roles. Elaine gathered boxes from under my bed, stacking them carefully. Harold carried furniture with the same reverence one would carry memory itself. Margot labeled with brisk clarity, kitchen, bedroom, donate. I moved more slowly, not from frailty but from reverence. Each object I touched seemed to whisper, "Are you sure?" And each time I answered, "Yes." From the garage we pulled out the pots of tomatoes, green and stubborn, survivors like me. Harold grunted under the weight but set them gently in the van, as though they were heirlooms. The quilt my mother had sewn decades ago went last, folded across the back seat of Elaine's car. "Every woman deserves to carry softness into her new life," Elaine said, her voice steady. By noon, the house was nearly bare of me. I had not taken everything, just what mattered. A handful of keepsakes, a few clothes, my notebooks, the pink linen dress. Enough to say I am still me. The final task was the note. I placed it on the granite countertop, written in my neatest script. "I've moved to a place where I am welcome. The house has been placed in a trust. You have 6 months to decide whether to purchase it or find another home. Raymond Teague has all the details. Please don't call until you are ready to see me as a person, not a problem." No anger, no theatrics, just clarity. I smoothed the paper flat and laid a single sprig of basil on top, green and fragrant, a quiet punctuation mark. I took one last look around. The walls were still beige, the air still faintly perfumed with the clean linen candle Paige had left burning outside my door. But without my boxes, without my things, the house looked hollow. It had never been mine, not really, not in spirit. But legally, factually, it still was, and that truth was folded in my purse beside the trust papers. Elaine touched my elbow. "Ready?" I nodded. We walked out together, closing the door gently behind us. I didn't lock it. let them walk into their silence unimpeded. The drive to Horizon Gardens was short, but it felt like a passage across decades. Every mile was a shedding of shame, of invisibility, of being managed. By the time we pulled under the pale yellow fence, I felt lighter than I had in years. Neighbors waved as the van backed up to Unit 8. Harold carried my chair inside. Margot set the quilt on my bed. Elaine unpacked the blue bowl and placed tomatoes inside it as if staging a photograph of freedom. When the last box was set down, Margot asked softly, "Do you want to go back for anything else?" "No," I said, surprised at how quickly the word came. "I've brought what matters." They left me that evening with Chinese takeout containers and hugs that felt like promises. I sat cross-legged on the floor, eating lo mein with chopsticks, surrounded by boxes that smelled like cedar and old paper. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's house. I felt alive. That night, I slept beneath my mother's quilt, the window cracked open to let in the summer chorus of crickets. No footsteps overhead, no whispered plans about placement options, just me, breathing in a space that belonged to me. When morning came, I brewed tea in my own kitchen. The light fell through the south-facing window exactly as I had imagined it, a golden rectangle across the floor. I set the pink linen dress on the chair, a reminder, you did it. Meanwhile, I imagined Paige unlocking the front door back in her house, seeing the folded note on the counter, realizing I had left, realizing the deed still bore my name, realizing her tidy folder of plans had been outmaneuvered by quiet defiance. The silence in that kitchen must have been deafening. I didn't gloat. I didn't rejoice in her shock. But I knew one thing for certain. For the first time in decades, the story of my life was mine to write. But freedom never comes without consequence. The phone started ringing, and when I saw Paige's name flash across the screen, I had to decide, would I answer or let her stew in silence? The first dawn in Horizon Gardens arrived like a soft verdict. I woke to crickets trading gossip and a square of sun climbing the far wall of my bedroom. No footsteps overhead, no candle waiting outside my door, pretending to clean the air of me. Just quiet, and the gentle creak of Unit 8 remembering it had a new heartbeat. I brewed tea, my kettle, my stove, my cup, and carried it to the little patio where basil perfumed the air like a blessing. The tomatoes had survived the move. Harold had tucked them against the railing so the morning light could find them. I set James's old pocket watch on the table as a paperweight. Even though it had stopped at 3:17 sometime in 1989, it still held time the way memory does. The phone started almost immediately. Paige, then Mason, then numbers saved as TY and Z, shorthand I'd entered on a day I thought abbreviating could make people closer. I let them go to voicemail, not from spite, from oxygen. I had promised myself no conversation until I could breathe without bracing. By 9, Margot tapped once and slipped in sideways with a clipboard and a smile. "Welcome home check," she said. "Any light bulbs out? Any shelves too high? Any mysteries we need to solve?" "Only one," I said. "What time do the bees arrive for the lavender?" "Depends who tells them first, Son or Harold," she answered, and I felt myself smile like I hadn't in months. Harold appeared at noon with a plant in each hand. "Mint for tea," he said gruffly. "Rosemary for roast chicken. Thought you might want to start a little row." "I do," I said, and we knelt side by side in the strip of dirt along my rail. He dug. I pressed soil back with the heel of my palm. It felt like writing my name in the ground. I walked the property that afternoon, learning corners and shortcuts the way a nurse learns a new ward. Georgia Wilson was pruning roses near the common room, a sun hat cocked like a question. "You're the nurse," she said, snipping a spent bloom. "We need you at the health committee Monday. Everyone here thinks they're an expert because they read one article on salt. I promised to come." 2 benches over, Beverly Chen moved through Tai Chi like a silk ribbon catching wind. She bowed slightly. "We do this Tuesdays and Thursdays," she said. "No judgment for wobbles. Wobbles are welcome." And on the path by the koi pond, a man named Marcus walked a terrier named Pepper, who believed every shoe needed greeting. "I read the paper out loud to whoever listens," Marcus said. "Sometimes it's Pepper, sometimes it's Harold. Either way, we get to the crossword." All day, my phone kept lighting up, a lighthouse without a map. Around 3, I listened to the voicemails in order. Paige's first message was controlled. "Mom, call me back, now." The second sounded more like the daughter who used to grab my hand in parking lots. "Please just tell me you're safe." Mason's was a negotiation disguised as concern. The kids' messages were simple and human. "Grandma, are you okay? I miss you." I texted the children, "I'm safe and happy. I'll reach out soon. Be kind to your mother." I didn't add "she's scared" or "she's not the villain," though both were true in complicated ways. As the sun tipped west, I unpacked the blue bowl that didn't match the aesthetic and filled it with tomatoes like trophies. I hung the pink linen dress on the closet door, not a costume anymore, a reminder. That evening was potluck in the common room. Margot led me to a table where Georgia had parked a bundt cake and Beverly had arranged grapes with the precision of a surgeon. No one asked why I'd moved. No one said the words "care facility" like a sentence handed down. They asked what books I liked, what hymn always undid me, whether I preferred peaches firm or bruised with sweetness. When I admitted I used to sing in the church choir, there was a chorus of "Wednesday is rehearsal. Come and see if your voice still knows the way." Halfway through my second helping of Harold's cornbread, the phone buzzed again. Paige. I stepped outside into lavender dusk and let it ring. Then I listened. Her voice had softened, the way voices do when anger has run its first lap and left only worry behind. "Mom, please, I don't understand. Why a trust? Why a note? Why like this?" A pause long enough to hear her breathe. "Just tell me where you are." I sat on the bench and looked at the window of my unit, lighted, warm, ordinary. Because I needed a home before I could have a conversation, I thought. Because if I had told you beforehand, you would have turned it into a meeting with an agenda and bullet points labeled placement, budget, timeline. I called Raymond instead of Paige. "Hold my address," I told him, "until she's ready to talk to me, not to the plan she made for me." "That's what I figured you'd say," he answered. "You're steadier than most of my clients half your age." Sunday morning, I went to watercolor in the rec room. Beverly set a jar of brushes in front of me and said, "Paint the thing you can smell." I painted lavender in a chipped mug, the hairline crack running like a river down the porcelain. When Margot pinned it to the corkboard, my chest did something like a sob, but lighter, as if a knot had loosened. Monday's health committee meeting was pure joy for a woman who'd charted vitals at 2 a.m. for 40 years. We argued friendly about sodium and steps, about how often to bring the clinic on site. "Once a week isn't enough," I said. "People skip when they're embarrassed by the first result." Heads nodded. Someone wrote Loretta, draft proposal. My name on a whiteboard. I could have wept. By midweek, Tyler texted again. "Can I see you? I won't tell Mom if you don't want me to." The secrecy pricked me. It wasn't the lesson I wanted to teach, but love finds you in the first language it learns. "Give it a few days," I wrote back. "I'll reach out with a time. I want this to be honest, not sneaking. I love you." He sent a heart. It looked clumsy and perfect on the screen, like the ones he used to cut from construction paper. That night, I set the table for one with good napkins. I cooked a small piece of chicken with rosemary and roasted the first tomato that had the nerve to blush. I ate slowly. I listened to the cicadas tuning up for their evening choir. The sky slid from gold to indigo without asking anyone's permission. Freedom, I was learning, is not loud. It is the absence of explanation. It is the ability to sit in your own chair and let a day pass through you without justifying your use of air. On Thursday, I answered one of Paige's calls, not to reopen the wound, but to clean it. "I'm safe," I said. "I'm well. When you're ready to speak to me as Loretta, not as a problem, I'm ready." Silence, then a shudder of a breath. "I don't know what that means," she whispered. "It means," I said gently, "no more plans about me without me. No more candles outside my door. Ask me what I want and listen to the answer." She didn't agree. She didn't hang up. We sat in that small hallway between old patterns and new ones, the call timer ticking its impartial seconds. After we ended, I walked the path by the koi pond. A dragonfly hovered like a thought that hadn't decided where to land. Pepper trotted up and demanded a scratch. I gave it gladly. Back in my unit, I wrote 3 words on an index card and taped it to the inside of my cabinet. Name, memory, choice. The same 3 I'd written in my notebook the night I first wore the pink dress outside the house that wasn't mine. On Saturday morning, as I whisked eggs for a humble omelet and the kettle sang, there came a knock, soft, polite, as if the visitor wasn't sure where their welcome started and ended. I wiped my hands, smoothed my hair, and opened the door. It wasn't Paige. It was Tyler, taller again, backpack slung over one shoulder. A look on his face I recognized from a different decade, the one children wear when they need a grown-up to be braver than a rule. "Grandma," he said, voice wobbling just a little. "Can I come in?" I thought I was ready for anything, until my grandson asked a question that would test every boundary I'd promised to keep. Tyler stepped inside like he was crossing into forbidden territory, sneakers squeaking against my clean floors. His backpack sagged with textbooks, but his eyes were wide, hungry, looking for proof that I was all right. "It smells like cookies," he said, a shy grin flashing. "It could," I told him, "if we make some." We did. I pulled out butter, sugar, and flour, and he cracked the eggs too hard, splattering yolk onto the counter. I didn't scold. I just laughed, a laugh I hadn't heard from my own throat in months. He grinned wider, and for the next 2 hours we were conspirators, not grandmother and boy separated by silence. When the first batch came out of the oven, he burned his tongue on a too hasty bite. "Worth it," he said through the pain, crumbs spilling down his shirt. Between cookies, he grew quiet. "Grandma, Mom says you left because you're mad at her." I set the spatula down. "I left because I needed a space of my own, not because I stopped loving her, or you, or Zoe." He studied me, as if measuring truth. "So, can I come again?" "Anytime," I said, and meant it. "But tell your mother, no secrets, no sneaking." He nodded, relief softening his face. "I'll tell her. She won't like it, but I'll tell her." The next week, Zoe came with him. She lingered at the doorway, arms folded, 12 going on 20. "It's small," she declared. "Yes," I said, "just right for one person." Tyler elbowed her. She made cookies. Her resistance crumbled in exactly half a cookie's time. Soon she was showing me pictures on her phone, chattering about a girl in her class who drew wolves in every margin, asking if I could teach her how to knit. "Next time," I promised. When they left, Zoe turned at the door. "I miss breakfast with you," she said. Mom's pancakes aren't the same. I miss it too, I admitted. But when we're together now, it will be special. A few evenings later, my phone rang again. Paige. I almost let it roll to voicemail, but something in me had shifted. I answered. She didn't waste words. The kids came home happy. Thank you for that. They're wonderful people, I said. You've raised them well. Her silence stretched, full of unsaid things. Finally, they miss you. We all do, in our way. It wasn't an apology, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall. 6 months passed like that. Tyler visited weekly, Zoe sometimes with him. Paige stayed away, but her messages softened, no longer sharp edges but tentative branches. Meanwhile, my tomatoes blushed, lavender hummed with bees, and I found myself laughing at Harold's garden jokes, watercoloring with Beverly, singing hymns on Wednesday nights until my throat felt 20 years younger. Then one crisp October morning, Paige appeared on my porch. She carried a bakery box like a peace offering. Coffee cake, she said, from Muller's, your favorite. I invited her in. We sat at my small table, the cake between us. She studied my modest kitchen, my lavender bouquet, the framed photo of her as a gap-toothed 7-year-old. The house is ours now, she said finally. Official. We closed yesterday. I'm glad, I said, and meant it. It's a good home for your family. Her eyes filled, then cleared. I've been thinking a lot about why you left, about how I made you feel. She swallowed hard. I didn't see you, Mom. I was so busy managing everything that I stopped seeing you. I'm sorry. The words landed like balm on a burn, too late to prevent the wound, but enough to soothe the scar. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm sorry, too, for not speaking sooner, for letting hurt pile up. So where do we go from here? She asked. Forward, I said simply. Separate, but connected, on new terms. Her smile wavered, fragile, but real. I'd like that. Before she left, she asked, will you come for Thanksgiving? As our guest, not our helper. I nodded. As your guest of honor. That night, I slipped into the pink linen dress. It fit differently now. My body had changed, yes, but more than that, my spirit had shifted. I wasn't trying it on for some imagined future anymore. I was wearing it for my present. I poured myself a glass of wine, stepped onto my patio, and listened to the laughter drifting from the common garden, the rustle of leaves in the Tennessee wind. For the first time in years, I wasn't tolerated. I was welcomed, and I whispered into the fading light, to James, to my younger self, to anyone who needed to hear it. I am still here, and I am enough.